Hello everyone, good afternoon. This is Dr. Sunil. Today's topic for discussion is complication in CKD, anemia in CKD, renal osteodystrophy, and vaccinations in CKD patients. So we'll begin now. So definition of CKD: CKD is defined as either as a reduced kidney function or a kidney damage, which can be in the form of reduced kidney function as glomerular filtration rate less than 60 ml per minute per 1.73 meters square for 3 or more than 3 months with or without the kidney damage, or kidney damage for more than 3 or more than 3 months with or without decreased GFR, which is manifested by either pathological abnormalities, marker of kidney damage, that is proteinuria, which is albuminuria, uh, abnormal urine albumin to creat ratio, which should be more than 30 mg per gram. So, as per KDIGO 2012, prognosis of the CKD by GFR and albuminuria categories were made, which suggest is there is a progression from green color to the red color. The prognosis of the patient deteriorates or prognosis of the patient becomes bad. So, for the patient with G1, GFR more than 90 and albumin level albuminuria less than 30 has a very good prognosis, which can be seen in the green mark. As the severity of albuminuria and the GFR deteriorates, the risk for more morbidity and mortality increases. And the one which are shown in the red boxes, they have a very high risk. So, what is the basic function of kidney? So it maintains the stable internal environment by filtration, reabsorption and secretion. Hormonal functions via renin, erythropoietin and calcitriol, and metabolic function like gluconeogenesis, metabolized drug and excretion of the drug products and endogenous substances. So what is the pathophysiology of complications in CKD patients? In CKD patients, normally the toxins which should be removed from the kidney are not excreted. So, due to the accumulation of toxins that normally should be excreted, uh, is the first reason. Second, due to the loss of other kidney functions such as fluid and electrolyte hemostasis abnormality and hormonal regulations. So, which leads to the various manifestation which we'll discuss later. And third is due to progressive systemic inflammation and its vascular and the nutritional consequences. So, what are the uremic symptoms we have? From GI point of view, we have nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, CVS like dyspnea, edema, chest pain, neurological like confusion, restless leg, twitchings, skin like pruritus, bruising, uremic frost, and musculoskeletals like bone pain and arthritis. So, how is the fluid, electrolyte, and acid-base disbalance occurs in CKD patient? In normal renal functions, tubular excretion of sodium in the water which matches the intake. So, what happens in CKD is the dietary intake of the sodium exceeds its urinary excretion. So, as a result of which there is a sodium retention. As there is a sodium retention, there will be a tendency to increase the extracellular fluid volume uh, due to extra salt, which causes the hypertension. Is there is an hypertension, this hypertension in turn accelerates the nephronal injury, which causes the peripheral edema, aggravates the hypertension. And also extrarenal fluid loss like GI losses, like in diarrhea or excessive use of diuretics, which causes the depletion of the uh, extracellular fluid volume, which causes the renal hypoperfusion, hypotension, which may result into AKI on CKD. So in CKD, the hyponatremia is less commonly seen, which is usually restrictive and fluid restriction and diuretic use. So second most common complication we find in CKD patient is hyperkalemia. Hyperkalemia is the aldosterone dependent secretion of potassium maintain the homeostasis of the potassium. So what happens in CKD is there is an increase in the dietary potassium intake. Causes for CKD, hyperkalemia CKD is increased dietary potassium intake, RAS inhibiting drugs, potassium sparing diuretics, hemolysis of hemorrhages, and repeated blood transfusions. These are the causes for hyperkalemia. And third is metabolic acidosis. Due to the low ammonia secretions, excretion of the H plus ion excretion of the H plus ion decreases. Uh, so the hyperkalemia which is occurring in CKD patient, that further precipitate the cause of metabolic acidosis due to decrease in the H plus ion. So what are the treatment of hypertension and fluid overload? What are the goals? First, we should maintain a goal for treatment of hypertension in CKD. Threshold for starting the therapy is 140 to 90. Any patient having BP above 140 to 90, we should start him on the medication. And what are the goals for therapy is to maintain the blood pressure less than equal to 130/80. So what are the first line drug of choice? ACE inhibitors and ARBs are the first line drug of choice for the patient having hypertension in CKD. So what should be the initial management should be like fluid restriction should be done, salt restriction, initiation of the first line drugs like ACE and ARBs, and use of loop diuretics and metalazone if the ACE and ARBs are not sufficient to control the hypertension. So hyperkalemia. So various drugs causes the hyperkalemia. Among them commonly prescribed are angiotensin ACE inhibitors, ARBs. Uh, which other drugs which should be used cautiously in CKD should be aldosterone antagonist, renin inhibitors, potassium sparing diuretics, and NSAIDs. So, if you are prescribing ACE inhibitors or ARBs or aldosterone antagonist or direct renin inhibitors to the patient, we should always check potassium within 7 to 10 days time. Uh, in case of potassium sparing diuretics in CKD or diabetic patient, the potassium level should be checked after 3 to 7 days of initiation of the therapy. So how we will manage the hyperkalemia? So first thing is reduce the dietary supplements of the potassium. Stop all the medications whichever is causing the hyperkalemia. Stop or reduce the beta blocker, ACE inhibitors or ARBs. Avoid the salt substitute that contain the potassium. And use of diuretics to increase the renal potassium excretion should be done. We can use the potassium binders like sodium polystyrene, which is most commonly used, calcium polystyrene, which is available in 15 grams, and patriomer to increase the GI loss of the potassium. Whereas in case of the refractory hyperkalemia, where the hyperkalemia is not responding to any of the uh, medication or the therapy, we consider as an hemodialysis, indication for the hemodialysis. So other disorder in the CKD patients are disorders of the phosphate and the calcium metabolism. So in CKD patient, bone manifestations are due to like first high turnover with increased parathyroid level, that is osteitis fibrosa cystica, and second is osteomalacia due to reduced action of the active form of vitamin D and low bone turnover with low or normal parathyroid level, that is adynamic bone disease. So there are two things in which one is parathyroid level is increased, uh, which result into the high turnover of the bones, which causes osteitis fibrosa, and another one is the one where the parathyroid level will be low or normal, but there is an osteomalacia due to low level of vitamins, vitamin D3. So there will be a low bone turnover and resulting into the osteomalacia. So or third can be a combination of two. We'll see in details these two. So first we'll learn about the physiology of parathyroid hormone. So what is the physiology of parathyroid hormone? So calcium, and they have calcium, whichever calcium present in the blood or the serum, they have a sensing receptor like calcium sensing receptors, which senses the level of the calcium ion in the body. So as per the calcium level in the body, parathyroid hormone is inhibited or stimulated. So when the parathyroid hormone is stimulated, suppose from the kidney, what happens? What are the effect of parathyroid hormone in the body? First, from the bone, the basic mechanism of parathyroid hormone is to increase the calcium level in the blood. So whenever the parathyroid hormone is stimulated or released from the parathyroid gland, from the bone, it increases the resorption of the bone, so thereby increase the calcium influx. So the bone calcium density will be low. Second, from the kidney, it increases the vitamin D3, D3 production and D3 activation. Second is increase the calcium reabsorption, and third thing, it causes the decrease in the potassium reabsorption. So it helps in phosphate excretion, calcium reabsorption, and activation of vitamin D3. From intestine, it causes the increase in the calcium reabsorption via the activation of vitamin D3. So all these mechanisms, like from the bone, kidney, and intestine, all which act in increasing the calcium level in the body. So in CKD depends. Before that, we'll learn what is FGF23. It is the fibroblast 23, growth factor 23. This is the one which is secreted by an osteocytes. It belongs to the family of phosphatidyls. So what is the function of FGF23? The major function of FGF23 is to maintain the phosphorus level in the plasma. So whenever there is an excess level or low level of phosphorus, there is an activation of fibroblast growth factor 23, which maintain the phosphate level in the body. So how it act? Action is via increases the renal phosphate excretion. So increases the serum parathyroid level and renal loss of phosphate via the parathyroid level, parathyroid hormone, and it decreases the activation of vitamin D3, thereby reduces the GI phosphate absorption. So three types of action it shows. So increasing the level of FGF23 is an itself is an independent risk factor for LVH and the mortality in CKD patient. So what happens in the CKD patient is there, uh, as the DFR is declining, so phosphate excretion will be reduced. Since the phosphate excretion is reduced, there will be an stimulation of FGF23 and thereby the parathyroid level. So raised FGF23 in turns, it will inactivate the vitamin D3 to prevent the GI absorption of phosphate, which leads to the reduced level of ionized calcium, which further stimulate the PTH. This will result into the secondary hyperparathyroidism. So, secondary hyperparathyroidism is rightly we see in osteoarthritis cystica fibrosa we discussed before. What are the clinical features for this? Clinical features includes bone pain, fragility, brown tumors, compression syndromes due to deposition, extra-articular or articular deposition, EPO resistance, muscle weakness, fibrosis of the cardiac muscles due to the deposition of the calciums in the cardiac muscles. What will be the bone histology? So bone will show the abnormal osteoid bone, abnormal osteoid formation. Bone and bone marrow fibrosis will be there, and in advanced stages, the formation of the bony cyst-like things will be there. Sometimes with the hemorrhagic element, with the inflammatory markers like macrophages collected in the cyst, which appears as a brown tumor. So the brown tumor basically is the collection of macrophages. So this is the brown tumor which we can see. This is seen in basically in osteoarthritis cystica fibrosa. So what is adynamic bone disease? Adynamic bone disease is the one in which the parathyroid level will be normal or low. So it's most commonly seen in patients with diabetes or elderly. This is due to the basically it is due to excessive use of the calcium or vitamin D product preparations. So what happens in this is it is characterized by the reduced bone volume and mineralization, which can be occur due to first excessive suppression of the parathyroid hormone. Because of excessive use of calcium and vitamin D3 production, the blood level of calcium will be high. So as a result of which there is a suppression of an parathyroid hormone. So second will be an chronic inflammation, and third can be because of both. So what will be the parathyroid suppression is due to excessive use of vitamin D3 preparation, excessive use of calcium containing phosphate binders, and high calcium dialysis solution. So what happens with the adynamic bone disease? So adynamic bone disease, there will be an increased incident of fracture and bone pain, increased vascular and the cardiac calcification, and tumor calcinosis, that is deposition of the calcium in the soft tissue, that we'll see later, and musculoskeletal pain due to microfracture, and osteomalacia, which is evident because low bone. So this is the calcium tumor calcinosis. There is a deposition of calcium in the soft tissue, which we can see resulting into the swelling. Third is calciphylaxis. What is calciphylaxis? It is the complications due to the calcification of the soft tissue, which when there is a vascular involvement due to high calcium level, there is a disruption in the vascular beds. So there occur the occlusion of the vessels. What is calciphylaxis in turn? Calciphylaxis is characterized by levodo reticularis. It presents in patches of ischemic necrosis over the legs, thigh, abdomen, and breast. So it is due to the vascular and the soft tissue calcification, which causes the vascular occlusions. So what can be the cause for calciphylaxis? Increased oral calcium as a phosphate binder. Warfarin in the hemodialysis patient is the most frequent cause for the calciphylaxis, and hyperparathyroidism. So this is the calciphylaxis, which we can see the necrotic part in between surrounded by a rim of granulation or reddish appearing skin. Uh, it is basically due to the occlusion of the vessels. Uh, so how will you manage the phosphate and the calcium metabolism? So first, for the high bone turnover like secondary hyperparathyroidism, first we should always, why the cause of secondary hyperparathyroidism CKD is basically due to the high phosphate. So we should correct the hyperphosphatemia. So how will you correct the hyperphosphatemia? We can correct the hyperphosphatemia by low phosphate diet first. Second, we have a phosphate binder preparation like Sevelamer, which is available in 400 mg or 800 mg, or lanthanum, which is 250 mg preparation. We can prescribe them for hyperphosphatemia. Second is how to control the hyperparathyroidism. Means secondly, to control the parathyroid level, we have a calcium sensing receptors which act as a sensor for the calcium level in the body. We have a calcium sensing receptor agonist, what is cinacalcet, which is available in the form of 30-60 mg preparation, but it is used when the serum calcium level is more than 9.5 mg per dl. So third is in case of low calcium, so calcium containing phosphate binders can be used. Treatment of the low bone turnover like turnover tissue like a dynamic bone disease. What is the treatment? Treatment is cut off all the supplements which are taking in excess, like calcium supplements and vitamin D3 supplements should be stopped. So what are the indications for parathyroidectomy in CKD patient? So refractory hyperparathyroidism, which is uh, is shown by refractory hypercalcemia and bone diseases, refractory pruritus, severe calcification like calciphylaxis and all are the indication for the parathyroidectomy in CKD patients. So what are the cardiac complications in CKD patient? Cardiac complication like fluid overload will be there, heart, which result into the heart failure. Second, hypertension, which is we already discussed. Left ventricular hypertrophy, accelerated atherosclerosis, and acute coronary syndromes. Okay, it can be there because of extra load to the heart. Okay. Now, basically in cardiac heart in CKD patients, the troponin I levels, normally the troponin I level is excreted by the kidney. In CKD patient, the excretion is decreased. So, trop I levels are already elevated in CKD patients without the evidence of acute ischemia. So whenever we are like suppose in a MI patient, we wanted to check for the troponin I level, it is not sensitive in CKD patient. So always check for the serial measurement of the tropi in CKD patient to find out whether the actual cardiac event has occurred or not. So that is there. And second is cardiac complications are the most common cause for death in CKD. So what are the CNS complications? CNS complications like uremic encephalopathy. This is seen usually when the GFR is less than 10 ml per minute, that is end stage liver renal disease. Altered sensorium, gait, speech abnormalities. But this uremic encephalopathy, these symptoms usually responds to an hemodialysis. Second is uremic neuropathy, which is because of the irritant substance, which toxins irritating the nerve fibers. Mostly the small nerve fibers are involved. That too of lower limbs are involved. Third is anemia in CKD. So anemia in CKD is the most common cause of low hemoglobin in patient with CKD. So what is the primary cause for CKD in anemia? So what happens is due to the CKD, due to the kidney non-functioning, there is a decrease in the erythropoietin production. So that is the primary cause for CKD in anemia in CKD. Second is diminished red blood cell survival. Third is bleeding diastasis. Fourth is iron deficiency due to poor dietary absorption and GI loss, or chronic inflammation itself is the cause for anemia. There may be nutritional deficiencies like iron deficiency, folate deficiency, vitamin B12 deficiency, hemoglobinopathy, hyperparathyroidism or bone marrow fibrosis, which in turn causes a decrease in the RBC productions. Comorbid conditions, other conditions like hypothyroid, hyperthyroid, pregnancy, HIV associated disease, autoimmune disease, immunosuppressive disease, all these contribute to the anemia in CKD. So basically anemia in CKD is a CKD of anemia of chronic. So what is the pathology? Anemia, if there is an anemia, there is a decreased tissue oxygen delivery and utilization, which results into the increase in the cardiac output, as we see in hyperdynamic circulation will be there in anemic patient, which causes the ventricular dilatations, which in turn causes the ventricular hypertrophy to pump out excess amount of the blood, which results into the diastolic heart failure. So there is an increase in the cardiac mortality. So clinical features like anemia, generalized fatigue, diminished exercise tolerance, angina on exertion, heart failure as we discussed, decreased cognition and mental activity, and impaired host defense due to low hemoglobin. So what is the treatment? So target hemoglobin in anemic patient in CKD is not like the regular one. Its target hemoglobin is 10 to 11.5 gram per dl. So basically first we should always give iron therapy. Iron therapy is started when the serum ferritin level is less than 50 nanogram per ml or the percentage saturation is less than 30. So parental iron formation we have are very wide. We have various parental iron formation are there. Few of them are iron sucrose, which is properly known as an urophore, ferric carboxymaltose, NC-carb or Ferinject or FCM is available, and ferric isomaltose is also available. So how to calculate the iron deficit? So iron deficit is like formula for consensus formula we have is 2.4 into body weight in kgs into the hemoglobin deficit, that is 15 minus hemoglobin, plus the 1000 we add for iron stores. This is the iron deficit we calculate and we give to the patient. Second is erythropoietin therapy, means erythropoietin is the major culprit in CKD patients. So we can give the recombinant erythropoietin, human erythropoietin, which is given usually in the 20 to 50 units per kg 3 times a week, like EPO 10,000 units, international units subcutaneous IV we give, or we can prescribe darbepoetin alpha, that is darbepoetin. It is available in the form of 40 mg or the 60 mg. But this use of an erythropoietin therapy, it causes the increase in the viscosity of the blood. So they have a risk of getting increased risk of a stroke, thromboembolic events, especially in the diabetic patient. So patient with resistance to ESA or erythropoietin has a poor outcome in CKD patient, because that is the only possibility we provide the EPO to the patient. So next topic is vaccination in the CKD patients. So in CKD patients, apart from the all like hepatitis vaccines, we should give other vaccine. We should always give hepatitis B vaccine, that is 3 dose normal regular schedule. 0.5 ml IM is given, that is given at the interval of 0, 1 and 6 months. Second is PCV 13 or Prevenar 13, which is available as a Prevenar 13. It is a pneumococcal unconjugated. It is a pneumococcal conjugated vaccine. The dose is usually a 0.5 ml IM. We are giving single dose only. Revaccination is not not needed or not indicated in case of PCV 13 vaccine. It can be given people of all age group. We can give like any age group people we can give. And second one is PPSV 23, that is Pneumovac. That is PPSV 23. Sorry, it is a pneumococcal polysaccharide vaccine. It's a polysaccharide one, which is also point dose is same. All three vaccine dose is same. It can be given IM or it can be given subcut also. That is advantage. It's usually given in the age group more than 65 years of age. On patient with comorbidities which can like diabetes, heart issues or renal issues, we can give in less than 65 years of age also. But we do not give in children's like less than age of 2 years, because it's a polysaccharide vaccine. So in less than 2 years of age, it will not be of any use. And third is revaccination is advisable after 5 years. So For the patient who are less than 65 years of age, if you want to prescribe Prevenar and PPSB 23, how we should give? So whenever we give the PCV 13, Prevenar 13, we can give PPSB 23, that is Pneumovac 23, after the 8 weeks, right? But if we are giving Pneumovac 23 first, then we cannot give Prevenar 13, that is conjugated vaccine, till 1 year. So basically what we should do is, ideally we should always vaccinate the patient with uh, Prevenar 13 first, and after the 8 weeks we should give the PCV 23 to the patient, PPSB 23. We should give, sorry, I'll clear it. We should always give Prevenar 13 first, then after the 8 weeks of Prevenar 13, we should give Pneumovac 23. So we can give both. Otherwise, if we are giving Pneumovac 23 first, then we have to wait for 1 year to give the Prevenar 13. So this is the slide, this is the one which showing that. So what are the contraindication to this? So contraindication to this are anaphylaxis. Anaphylaxis to the diphtheria toxoid is a contraindication to PCV 13, that is Prevenar 13. Why? Because the Prevenar 13 is a conjugated vaccine. The conjugate which is contained consists of an toxoid which is similar to that of the diphtheria toxoid. So it is contraindicated in patients who were already given a diphtheria toxoid and they are having anaphylaxis reaction. It is contraindicated in Prevenar 13 also. So what are the side effects? Usually pain, tenderness, induration, erythema, swelling usually lasts for 72 hours. Okay, thank you.